geology has its entropy, where everything is gradually wearing down. The irreversible process will be in a sense metamorphosized. It may be that human beings are just different from dinosaurs, rather than better. In other words, there just might be a different situation. Robert Smithson, 1971. Taking the idea of geological entropy from Robert Smithson, the project attempts to question the life cycle of urban artifacts and seek solutions to stimulate the pursuit of longevity. By sourcing material from the city and densifying existing urban fragments as sedimentary layers, urban sedimentology claims a geological approach of architecture in order to terminate the cycle of demolition and rebuild. Imagine yourself in London 1,000 years from now. In what state are the urban artifacts we leave behind? The human activities of excavation and construction are exceeding the natural process of erosion and sedimentation as a significant part of geological entropy. While a piece of stone takes hundreds of millions of years to form and the compression heat, its lifespan as a building material is relatively short. After greedy excavation to source material, in the end, we produce a huge amount of construction and demolition waste. In 2015, London's population just surpassed its pre-war peak, but an increasing amount of construction is undertaken to meet its changing needs. The building industry contributes 40% of UK's total carbon footprint and more than half of the waste stream in England. There is a continuous cycle of demolition and rebuild. Throughout the history of London, extensive infrastructure has been developed to make way for its urban expansion. To build up our world, substantial natural territories have been occupied, where the geological material is excavated, transformed, and abandoned. While we try to reshape the world to meet our demand, the increase of overall entropy on Earth is accelerated. How can we reconcile our city construction to the process of entropy? The recognition of geological time often comes side by side with the unearthing of geological material. Since the 18th century, there has been a fascination with the geological process. Geology became Piranesi's unique scope to investigate and speculate the movement and permanence of sedimentary layers beneath Rome. The sacrificial specimens were collected and reassembled into Joseph Gandy's painting. In Viollet Ledoux's case, the geological geometry becomes a regional and tectonic principle to analyze, to speculate, to construct both the mountain to decay and the walls to be built. By introducing the notion of geological time and taking human construction as the Anthropocene layer of the Earth's crust, geology is constructed within the form of architecture. How can we terminate demolition? The mayor has set ambitious aim for London to be a zero-carbon city by 2030, but we can only achieve this by thinking even further. The project introduced an embodied carbon emission restriction on a land basis. While the carbon emission of a high-density carbon-intensive tower may use up most of the allowance per square meter on site, a long-life structure with a relatively low density can leave more carbon allowance for further development, which benefit the land value. If we legislate carbon molecule in Parliamentary Act, reflections on longevity will be stimulated from the molecule scale to the city scale, leading to revolutionary changes in building regulation, planning, permission, and spatial development strategy for Greater London. We have to source material without excavation and build for longevity. Reclaimed building material and long-life material will be favored to absorb carbon emission and reduce the influence on carbon allowance. We have to construct without demolition. Wholesale demolition will become outdated, as it will waste carbon allowance per plot and endanger the potential of the land, therefore decreasing the land value. As a short-life structure which has to be demolished and rebuilt can endanger the carbon land allowance, long-life material and long-life structure will become investment to the land. The building then becomes infrastructure that can be incremental growth to meet our need. We have to densify our city without expansion, as the carbon land allowance is only designated within the existing urban footprint. Urban sprawl will be restricted. Redundant material from the suburbs will be reused to densify the center of the city. Space between and above existing structures will be occupied if necessary. Within the square mile, the current site of Museum of London is investigated. The current building, with its iconic post-war concrete structure and raised pathways, its relationship to London Wall and collision with the existing Ironmonger's Hall, composes an architecture of layering. However, the scrap proposal of Center for Music by Delos Cofidu repeated the ignorance of demolition and rebuild, where the demolition and rebuild proposal used up almost 45,000 tons of embodied carbon. Meeting the same demand by reusing and adapting existing structure can reduce 3/4 of carbon emission. Can we imagine a city built up as a bricolage of waste we have produced? While brick structures in London represent the sedimentary material beneath the city, can we construct new structures with contemporary sedimentation? Can we take our city as the quarry of the source material? Urban sedimentology takes the application of lowland material as the essence of further construction. It also initiates alternative material palettes based on the combination of reclaimed building elements. A disassembled concrete element is turned into a precast beam, then concrete blocks in the wall, later on, becomes an aggregate for a new piece. Urban sedimentology challenges the existing system of material evaluation. Fragments, components, and aggregates within the city should be re-evaluated and reused, complementing the palette for the urban bricolage, with their transformative forms throughout their life cycle into considerations. The idea of architecture as a series of geological layers can be found in our cities historically. The sedimentary layers of Tabularium in Rome, the accumulated structures transferring the outside amphitheater into a village, to the insertion of Catholic Church in Cordoba Mosque. The existing structures have become new grounds for the future. The idea of using waste to adapt buildings, and the process of adaptation and densification already happens. But the simple fact of minimizing demolition will alter the way the city evolves. As a palimpsest of historical layers, the city can always be densified without wiping out the existing. Throughout the time, layers and layers of creations accumulated on topography of the existing structure, adapting them to the ever-changing demands of human life. The financial waste inherent in the cycle of demolition and rebuild is avoided. This saving is recycled into more affordable places to live and more generous spaces in which to walk. Spaces that are shared by the community, are valued, and are never lost or desecrated. The existing urban artifacts, which survive the fire, the war, and ongoing demolition, should be maintained and reused. The new structures facilitate and complement the existing as sedimentary layers. The greatest products of architecture are less the work of individuals than of society. Rather than the offspring of a nation's effort, than the inspired flash of a man of genius. The deposit left by a whole people, the heaps accumulated by centuries, the residue of successive evaporation of human society. In a word, spaces are formations. Each wave of time contributes its alluvium. Each race deposits its layer on the monument. Each individual brings his storm. Victor Hugo, 1831. This is urban sedimentology, an architecture paradigm operating within a new legislative framework. It opposes excavation, demolition, expansion, and provoke reuses, repurposing, and reassembling of what we already have. Above all, it places value on what we collectively own as a community, as a society. It allows for adaptation to new needs while respecting our past. It is an architecture of longevity and slow change. An architecture that always reconciles and accepts.